week, surgeons in New York successfully attached a kidney from a genetically engineered pig to a human body. The purpose was to see if a non-human kidney could provide a viable option for kidney replacements in the future. According to the CDC, there are roughly 75,000 people on organ waiting lists on any given day, but just 8,000 deceased organ donors and 6,000 living donors available each year. And joining me now to discuss this and more is Dr. Jozef Zalot, staff ethicist at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Dr. Zalot, welcome back. Great to see you again. As the surgery that I mentioned was a significant step, certainly scientifically, and of course there is a need there. But that said, what are the ethical implications of using gene-edited animal organs as a way to sustain human life? And also, where does the church stand on this issue?
Well, Tracy, thank you for having me back. In short, there's really not a problem with this from the Catholic perspective, as long as a few ethical principles are maintained, including treating the animals as humanely as possible. So, as we know from Genesis 1, God gives humanity dominion over the created order. And I think this experimentation, what we saw in New York just recently, is a good example of this. Now, certainly our Jewish and possibly our Muslim brothers and sisters might have a problem with using organs from pigs. And in fact, no one would be forced to accept an organ from an animal if they found it repugnant. But really, from the Catholic perspective, there's no real ethical concern with this.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the pig's kidney, was genetically modified, obviously, with the purpose of being used for research.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit more about that, raising animals, whether they're genetically edited or not for the sole purpose for medical research like organ donation? Is that ethical, and does the church have a position on that when it comes to genetically modified animals?
Well, I think again, it's God has given humanity dominion over the created order, and so what we're called to do is use animals and use all created goods for good ends. So, for example, we use animals for food, we use the animals for clothing, and again, I think using genetically edited pigs for the human good, for human health, can be a very, very good thing. Now, again, some animal rights people, and some have already started asking questions about this. They'll raise concerns, but I think the basic question to ask is whose good is primary? Is it that the human person's good, or is it the animal's good? And I think from the Catholic perspective, as long as we're using these animals for good ends, and it seems to be the case in this situation, that there's really no ethical concerns with it.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up, because I do think a lot of people have questions about that for sure. I'm going to kind of stick with organ donations here.
Sure.
Those organ donations really typically actually come from either living donors or deceased donors, of course, as you know. But some of those donors are people who are considered to be brain dead. Can you talk to us about maybe how a doctor determines if a patient is brain dead and the concerns around harvesting organs from those individuals?
Yeah, so there are criteria for doctors to determine whether someone is what we call whole brain dead. And here in the United States, normally it's the American Academy of Neurology criteria that's used. And what the church has said, that if that criteria is used correctly, we can determine with moral certitude that the person is deceased, and then we can procure the organs. But there are people who are starting to ask questions about whether or not that criteria is in fact if it's a good criteria for determining brain death. And so if this process of gene editing animals and producing organs that can be used for human transplant, I mean, not only on a practical level will it make more organs available for us, and we wouldn't have to, Tracy, as you said, we wouldn't have to rely on people, people who get into accidents and things like that in order to procure their organs, but would also be able to hopefully, or at least theoretically, head off this question of, is a person actually dead when we procure their organs?
Yeah, I want to shift here. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to get your input on this, something that's been in the news a lot over the past weekend. A bipartisan group of lawmakers are addressing their concerns over an investigation by the nonprofit organization, the White Coat Waste Project. They claim that the NIH used taxpayer money to fund research, and that research allowed dozens of dogs to be tortured and killed. The details of that are really kind of horrific. I want to get your thoughts on that, if you know about that, and where the line should be drawn when it comes to scientific research.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I just really saw this article just a few minutes before we came on here, so I really don't know all the details of it. But I think the real question that needs, or the first question anyway, that needs to be asked is, what's the purpose for this experimentation? What are they doing? And, as I would agree with you, just reading the details very quickly, it does seem pretty horrific. But I think something to keep in mind is that, there's a lot of outcry on the use of animals for this type of research. But the fact of the matter is, researchers are also doing the same types of thing on preborn children. And I think that, the University of Pittsburgh question or that issue has been in the news recently. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. We've talked about that on this newscast before. Very, very important. Dr. Zalot, thank you so much for coming in and weighing in on this subject. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anytime.